again, welcome to Good Old Double Bits Workshop. In today's video we're going to go through and do a nice little quick review on the Chicago Electric 10-inch sliding compound miter saw. It is sold at Harbor Freight and it currently retails for about 130 bucks, but you can get a coupon at the moment for $94.99. It is a very good product and I've actually been using it for a few of my videos. It's not purchased by me. A friend of mine actually suggested that I try it in comparison of my normal Ryobi that I use, which if you do want at the end of this, I can also create another video for you guys comparing the two. But let's get into this good old chop saw here. So let's go over some basic statistics and just some basic readouts of what this chop saw has to offer. And some of the things that I like about it and some of the things that I kind of was not so huge on. I've said in my other review video, I have used quite a few different products. I have used this product before, but not in a full length. So I was able to give it quite a few projects. I'll kind of go through and roll a little bit here, showing you all the varying different projects that I've gone through and been able to produce some fine products, if you will, or just enjoyable items that I've created using said chop saw. And that was also what gave me the know-how and use of it to actually feel I have a review to stand on. So this has about 8 different SKUs, so I just chose the one that this one actually has on it. So the SKU for this item is 90891. The product is, of course, a 10-inch blade, and it can make up to a 12-inch wide cut on it. It does boast a good, nice, solid table. I was actually pretty happy with that. It is all metal. The only part that isn't is the insert, which actually I'm quite happy with. So that way if you did have a straying cut or unknowingly you did pull really hard, you don't have a steel blade hitting a steel table. They actually give you the leniency that it could actually dig into a plastic item, saving you the misfortune of having the blade wobble or potentially lose teeth at your face or anything else, which was a nice benefit. There is 1 or 2 of those that I've used in the past. Technically, the older Deltas had that in 1 or 2 models that I used that was a steel table, and I did have a very kind of oh crap moment where the blade did hit for a second, and luckily it just stopped, but it did chip a little bit of the project and one of the teeth at me there for a second, so that was a bit of a scary point there. This boasts having full ball bearings on both sides, as well as a very nice slide and roll. A generous amount of bearings are in here from the sounds of it and the feel of it. You can take the dust covers off to do proper maintenance and cleaning on them, which is a maintain point of this that I will have to make, as well as you can take out and clean the brushes, which is nice. It is a solid cap. You can't get to the armature, but there is some good venting, so if you did want to, you can go through and blow out the dust, which I generate a lot of dust in my shop, even with the dust collector, so it is nice to be able to have the ability to get in there. Some different models didn't have too much porting or venting and had a tendency to get a lot of dust in them, so I am happy this one has a bit more venting, and you do have the ability to take out both brushes and have a nice little clean wind tunnel effect when cleaning the unit. It is a 15 amp motor, so that way if you are hooking into any part of your house, as long as it's not super old, you should have no issues or breakers popping. If you have a breaker popping with this running, more than likely you have too much of a pull in the circuit anyway, like if you had a dryer and a variety of other things somehow running on a 15 amp circuit. This might pop it then, but otherwise for any normal garage workshop or section of the house that you have just basic wire running to, this will be able to run off of those plugs, which is a really nice feature. I've used different chop saws in the past that have had to have a 20 amp, if not even a 30 amp, which was ridiculous, but it's just how the model specific was. You had to worry about that quite a bit, or just having shop lights on and having this running, no issue. You might see a little pulse in your lights, but nothing major. Its peak is right at 15 or just below it, so you won't have anything too hard to trip a breaker just by going into a harder piece of oak or something else getting cut with this. It has a standard 5/8 arbor on it, so you can use any kind of normal popular 10-inch blade with it, which is nice. It doesn't have any kind of odd arbor that you have to have an adapter that comes with it, which I've had some kind of Hitachi models or other models that gave you that ability, but they gave you a real tiny arbor with an adapter, which usually ended up wearing out and having your blade just kind of wiggle and give an improper cut, and also you just have a wiggling blade at however many RPMs the unit was spinning at your face or right next to your body. Just always gave me a leery feeling, which this one is a normal proper arbor, which is always a good benefit. Max RPM is 4,800 at full. So when you hold down the trigger and you hear it spin up all the way, it gets up to about 4,800 RPMs, which is good to cut through most things. A few units can go a little bit faster and a little bit quicker with your cuts. This doesn't take long to get up to that top amp speed, which was nice. I've had some Makitas in the past give me that issue where you hold down the trigger and you have to almost wait for it to spool up. Some older Deltas gave me that with that same kind of issue. In this price range, or the more not full-on commercial grade or anything like that, or a Unisaw's equivalent for high point. Let's give a few dimensions here real quick. So the full height of it is 22 inches, which is really nice. Depending on the size of your shop or where you're going to be storing this until in use, it actually does break down pretty low and it doesn't go up too high, which is nice. Whoop. So it has a nice feature on the side here that has a pull lock, so you can actually pull it out and then rotate it and use your normally for your cuts. But then you can also click it over to it just auto locks for you. Kind of a small little thing, but I've noticed with other chop saws and this one, it is nice to not feel like you have to slam the thing down, reach around and hit in the little lock. Sometimes when you're really tired or at the end of a job or something like that, the little things count. And it is nice that it is something that you can just twist around, pop it down, don't have to think about it. And it automatically locks in place for you versus constantly being sprung out. Any of the other little twist mechanisms and whatnot. This is side note, but it is a nice feature. The width of the item is 17 3/16. The length of the item is 35.5 inches. The weight of it is 32.5 pounds, which is actually a rather light one when you think about it. A few chop saws that I've toted around get up into the 50 pound range and a little higher, depending on the type of blade you have on it. If you keep an extension cord wrapped on it, all those fun gizmos. This is actually a nice one that you could move from room to room of a house if you're doing trim work, and it's not going to absolutely break your back. The handle is actually quite stout. The front handle is all plastic, like a lot of them are. There is some mild flex, but nothing major whatsoever. It is actually a very sturdy construct, which is nice, and I don't feel like when I lift this up you can bow the whole thing. Some of them have that where it's like a feature of having the handle, but I always just found myself holding the whole item and walking around very awkwardly. This actually does have a nice lock, and it will stay right where you put it for the nice fulcrum wherever you're going upstairs or whatnot. So nice, very sturdy design, especially for the price. I'm actually going to say that a lot, and I do apologize, but the price point for what you get, this is actually a very nice bang for your buck unit. I have to say, I'm quite surprised. If I hadn't bought my Ryobi, I would be more than happy to be using this with all of my projects. It does come with its standard 90-day warranty that Harbor Freight offers. You can extend the warranty. They have a 1 year and I believe a 2 year, and I think on certain models they may offer up to a 3 year, depending on how much you're willing to purchase it for. I think a couple of them vary from up to $70 when I last checked, which is kind of, you want a 3-year warranty for $70, or you could wait again to potentially purchase it for $95, need something arise or happen a year or two down the road. So my friend had this unit for a bit of time, and he's made a few projects with it, and then he let me borrow it, and I've done quite a few projects, as you've seen in my channel, me using it a bit, and it's done everything I could ask of it and I would want in a chop saw. I have no real major complaints with it at the moment, but we'll get to that here in a second. The one thing that is kind of a point to touch on is it is $95 essentially, or $94.99 right now currently with the coupon, but the unit does not come with a blade. So you will have to purchase a blade for the unit, which isn't a huge expense, and you actually can choose at that point to not get just like a general use blade. You can actually get one for fine wood cutting. You can get a more beefed up blade if you're going to be going through some more oak material, or if you are just going to be doing fence posts and stuff and you want a quick ripping blade that you're not too worried about having a nice fine cut, but just a quick rip through it and the blade will last a while going through more junky wood, or just something you're not worried about fine precise work, you can choose your blade. So it's kind of a nice benefit, and since it is a basic arbor and any 10-inch blade will fit in there, you can go through and choose a DeWalt blade, a Makita blade, or any brand of blade that you want out there. You could even go up to a Diablo blade if you wanted to, which is nice, and then that gives you that flexibility where you get a nice chop saw with the ability to get whatever blade you want to put on it. So it's a pros and cons here. It does suck not having a blade out of the box, so you will have to remember to make that purchase as well while you're at the store. Otherwise, you'll have Not so fun experience getting to the house and then having to turn right back around and go to either a Lowe's, Home Depot, or right back to Harbor Freight to get an Admiral blade or any of the ones therein that you so choose. So that's one thing to definitely make note of. I would say that is more a con than a pro for sure. So I'm going to say that's a con right off the bat, but we'll get to those here in a second. The blades do vary for about $25 to $40 at Harbor Freight, depending on which ones you get. At least when I took a quick gander, I wasn't solidly looking at it because I have varying blades in here of my shop, even some brand new ones, so I didn't necessarily need them, but I was kind of getting a quick glimpse last time I was there just out of curiosity. It's Harbor Freight. You always got to walk around and see what new wares there are, or if there's something nice on sale that they're discounting out or clearancing. It's Harbor Freight. Alright, the cut capacity for the chop saw is 2 3/4 inch up from the bottom to the top. So just keep that in mind. If any of your projects are going to go over that, you're going to have to either do the old roll and cut to continue with, but that is also just kind of a standard 10-inch chop saw distance. You're going to be kind of confined to almost 3 inches for your cuts, but you're not always going to be turning your 2x4s on end to make those cuts, but it would cut through a 2x4 on its side essentially. So kind of use that as a rough parameter in your mind if you're going to be using this one to make those cuts. It does have a little bit of restriction, but nothing major. That is kind of a standard for most 10 inches. Horizontal cuts, like I said, the table is 12 inches is what it boasts for the ability when in straight 0 point is that you can make a full slide cut out to 12 inches. Now your 12-inch mark, you're going to have just a little bit of a cup, so you're going to actually raise your material up slightly to make your full cut. You can go over 12 inches in doing so. That's all up to your how comfortable you feel with the unit in doing that. I've done construction for quite a few years, so I was used to having to lift the material to make the additional cut. But we also used a lot of chop saws that were 12 inches and 10 inches, so depending on what job I was on, it's all within the realm of what you feel comfortable with. It's not suggested by any means. So maintain safety, of course, with all units. This one does definitely require, just like any chop saws, to be definitely safe. You will still have a slight gap on your guard. So even in an upright position, reaching in to grab material, just maintain safety. The unit does come with a dust bag. I will say, sadly, I was not super amused with how the dust bag worked, or how well it worked, sadly. So just as a standstill, I've done quite a few projects with this, and out of the entire time of using it, this is how much dust it has collected. I'll kind of get up here a little bit closer. So out of this whole bag, and all the videos you've seen me produce so far, this is all the dust that this has actually caught. And most of the material that I cut ends up kind of dispersing. So we'll kind of get into that a little bit further here at the pros and cons, but that is one issue I've found with this so far, is that as it is with just the bag, it doesn't collect much sawdust. So if you have a shop vac or anything like that, this is kind of a standard size for just your normal shop vacs, not the huge industrial grade that has the larger, more close to like 3-inch end on it. This is going to be your more tiny shop vacs or whatnot. But if you're purchasing this chop saw, more than likely you'll have the smaller shop vac as well. Me in the smaller space, I have the larger shop vac, but I probably will pull my smaller shop vac eventually, because then it will just port and hook right into the dust port on this one. This does have the nice kind of what I feel is somewhat standard, but not always standard. There are a few chop saws you can purchase that don't have them, but they do have the extension arms, which is a nice feature to have. Just even those extra couple inches definitely help to stabilize your equipment. I think this one is 3 inches if I remember right. Yep, 3 inches is what it gives you for the length. So this unit does feature the nice clamp arm right here. Get that real quick, forgot to put that on there. So it does feature the nice clamp arm. It is detachable and adjustable, and it works really good for putting a little piece of scrap material, getting your dimension just right, and then you can pump out a variety of little cuts without getting too close to the blade. It also gives you the ability to keep a nice spot on your chop saw, so that way you can make consistent cuts at the same distance if you're making a larger project that requires a variety of pieces within about a 6-inch to, a couple inch little cut pieces and whatnot, which I've used quite a few more times than I thought it would, which is very nice. It has the nice standard, I feel to an extent, the ability for the 45-degree miter cuts on both sides, as well as you do have a clamp in the top here. Get this little pull. It does have the bevel cuts as well that will go to a proper 45. There are a few models that don't allow that, so it is noted, or well worth noting, that this has that capability, which is nice. So you can make full-on compound miter cuts. You just want to make sure to remove the arm, as I had earlier. For each of the twist knobs actually feel quite firm. I will say that each item seems to have a nice audible lock, as well as seems to stay in place rather well. I had no drifting cuts. I had no issues with my handle kind of getting pulled as easily as some models have in the past, given me that ability to where I get a little tired and pull and my cut goes off. This actually had very precise cuts. I had only a few cuts that were off, and I realized that I didn't have my material butted up fully to the fence in the back, so that's 100% on me. I can't fault the unit for having like, oh, 1 out of every 10 cuts was off or anything like that. I didn't have any of these issues because I'm making sure to monitor and go through the whole process with in mind for review and kind of putting it through its paces. So I didn't actually have any issues with that, not pumping out the proper cut right when I asked for it and doing it in a timely manner, which was nice. There's a nice feature on the front here that I always forget, if the model offers it, that is. But this does have the leveling screw, so that way if you're making your cuts and making your miters, and even if you did have this bolted, sometimes you can flex it and get it to be off level. Now if you have it fully on an item that sticks out, a lot of my workbenches sadly don't give me that capability, but if you have this on a table or a tailgate and you wanted to get some nice leveling capability, you can use this front screw to give you that capability, and this model offers it, which is nice. Has your standard instructional booklet for basic maintenance and different parts that you can order through. Either, I think it was Harbor Freight did have a customer service that you can look through, and you can get some basic proprietary components for it. You can go through on eBay and you can go through on Amazon and purchase some little components for this, such as the brushes, blades, of course, all day long for any 10-inch chop saw of any kind. You can get the switch. I do believe that varied in price depending on who is selling through Amazon or eBay, so you can get them. If for whatever reason the switch wears out and you're well past your warranty on it, and you want to make sure to maintain and keep the unit, I believe the switch is varied. Some of the items I found for sale were like $20, but you did still have to pay like an $8 shipping fee. So kind of plan for around like $25 to upwards of $50 depending on who is selling the item, but they are able to be purchased. So that is up to your discretion. If you feel everything else on the unit is well worth keeping around and you're past your 90 days, you can still buy proprietary little items for it, such as the arm can still be purchased. I want to say this unit was around $15 to $28 as well. Kind of interesting how they did that. You can buy the little screw knobs here. I think a 2-pack was around like $15-20. You can also purchase the little switch here and the arm, so that way if anything goes wrong with this, you can swap those out. You can also swap out, like I said, the little twist knobs here. I believe you could actually buy the whole shroud covering here, so for whatever reason this takes a hard whack and they don't want to warranty it out for you, but you don't want to go through an additional purchase. Let's say the coupon is no longer valid, so you'd have to buy this at the full, I think, $130 mark, roughly around. You could potentially buy just the dust cover or covering for the housing of the armature and everything on their site, and it is just a normal Phillips screwdriver to take it off. And you will pop the handle off. Just be careful if you have to. You can, which is nice though. And you can swap out this part, you can swap out the handle for any of the covering or anything like that, which was nice. And those prices were varying. I can't give you a definitive on them. I do know I found a couple listings for used components and also brand new, ranging from about the same price brackets, anywhere around $30 up to $70, which at that point it's kind of up to you and your discretion, but it is really close to a purchase price for the whole unit again. But it is a nice that you could, for whatever reason that you needed to, swap those components out, which is, like I said, just things that you're keeping an eye out for and wanting to know. You're not going to buy something that if anything goes wrong you'd have to buy another one for. It's not a throwaway item. You could replace it, which is nice. I would put this in the classification for the very beginning to moderate user for sure. You could start out and have this be your very first chop saw. as we all do, and as you are probably right now, watching through a variety of YouTube videos to see how easy it is to use. You want to see if it's going to be something that's going to be super complex and convoluted, or if you're going to have additional proprietary parts that you had no clue you were needing for it. This unit is pretty much good to go out of the box, except for the blade, of course. But I would feel confident to have a brand new newbie woodworker or any kind of construction worker use this tool with minimal to no real effort, past any of your basic proprietary knowledge for a chop saw and its uses and just basic safety. I'm going to keep stressing that because a chop saw is one of those tools. It's not quite along the lines of a table saw, but it is still a dangerous tool depending on how it's used. And any tool, if improperly used, even a screwdriver, could cause harm. So just always be careful. And if you are having this as a possible purchase for your son, daughter, anyone that's potentially getting into woodworking, son-in-law or anything like that, or even your grandfather that wants to get into woodworking, this would be a great unit that I would highly recommend for them. Just always make sure to stress on the safety part for any chop saw purchase. I will say one of the things that I also liked, I didn't think I would use them as much, but they are pretty well accurate, is the line indicators on here for measurement for inches. And this one goes up to 8 inches, and this one, of course, like I said, goes to the 12-inch mark and a little bit beyond, so like 12 and a half, 12 and a quarter-ish inches. You actually are, I would trust them within, like I said, within reason. They're a little bit bolder, so you can't really get them down to the 16th or like less than a 16th. You could get them pretty close. If you were making broad stroke cuts and you weren't worrying about being ultra precise, but you wanted to get it close, like if you're cutting something down real quick to just wedge a door open, or like I've used quite a few times, fence posts or anything else like that, and you're just blazing through cuts and you're not too concerned with that 16th to an 1/8 cut, these are more than accurate to be able to do that, and they are actually grooved or cut into the metal, so that way if it does get dusty or it does get dirty, you don't have a sticker or something you're constantly having to wipe off to consistently reuse them. And these are actually properly cut in, so they kind of are embossed looking or almost sticking out for these measurements. So even if it does get really dirty and grimy or dusty as you're working with it and doing your project, you'll still be able to pretty well see the line, if not clearly see the line, which is a nice benefit and feature to the item. Now, in comparing the Chicago Electric lineup of chop saws, I will say there are 3 primary ones that you can get. I think there's one model you can get that's kind of an in-between. But for the 10-inch range, you can get a sliding chop saw and a normal chop saw. There is some pros and cons to one over the other. They kind of gave you a little bit of a mix and mash of the both. And then when you jump up to a 12-inch, they gave you kind of all of the goodies, which is, I get it. In order to hit this price point, you're going to have to make a few little compromises. They're slight. So one of the compromises that they made on this model, if you can say that, is it doesn't have the laser. It's not a huge, killing factor. A lot of the time you're going to want to measure your equipment or measure your material that you're cutting, so you're not going to worry too much about having a laser line for it. It is a nice feature if you're just like blazing through cuts and you don't mind that little, like I said here, a little varying cut between the two. You're not absolutely shaving 30 seconds or 16ths of an inch. At that point, they're great for it. But this model doesn't actually have that on there. It is in the cons list of my pros and cons I'll go through here. But just like I said, something to be noted on it. The other issue that I have with this model versus their 12-inch model is you don't have a brake. So when you let off the actual trigger, I can plug it in and have you give a listen here. So it spins up real quick, which is nice, but then you have all that time before the blade actually stops spinning. So if I go through and make a cut, there's all that time that if I'm not paying attention, reaching forward, pulling out, this blade is still spinning right where my fingers would be potentially right at. And if I'm in a downward stroke, pull up, and I don't have it fully up, or the spring doesn't get in, and I immediately reach for my equipment or whatever material that I'm going for, the blade is still spinning for a few seconds. So that's one kind of thing that gets me a little bit. If you're being cautious with it, it's not an issue by any means, and I was able to make quite a few cuts and quite a few projects without it. But it is one benefit and feature that I had on a variety of other chop saws that I definitely grew to enjoy. And if I'm being speedy with my cuts and not quite fully being safe with it, in all honesty, and just trying to move quickly through my project, the other units kind of having those breaks slow down the blade a lot faster saved me. It was only a few seconds quicker, but it just depends. Like I said, that's just one thing to keep in mind. The unit is not faulty by any means. That is how it comes and that is how it runs perfectly fine doing so, but it's just one thing to kind of keep in mind for it. So the motor, how it kind of spins up like that and then has a low, like slow down on it, reminds me a great deal of a chop saw. So I could almost venture to say this is a more beefed up version of the Chicago Electric circular saw. So this seems to be almost like a beefed up motor from a circular saw, which is essentially what a chop saw kind of came from to begin with, but this has more of that kind of feel and appeal to it, if you understand what I mean. The cut table does have machine marks on it, which isn't highly noticeable. It's still kind of a gloss to it, but the benefits I like of this is you can still have your material slide across it and kind of have a mild grip. There has been a few chop saws that I've had in the past or worked with that were an absolute shiny mirror, which one of those things I'll say right off the bat, if I am having that on my tailgate and I'm working and it's a hot sunny day, the sun a lot of times will reflect off of that. Or if I'm up in the second story of a house or something and my chop saw is outside and I'm moving around and I go down and work on my projects and have all my cutting and everything outside and I go in for my project, that's kind of a blinding light up in my eyes, which this having just even that little bit of a more matteness to it, it will have a reflection but not near as bright, which is a side note, but the dust and such on there will actually keep the unit from sliding properly, or it'll slide too easy, which allows you to have your cut go off or your fingers to get close to the blade, which is always a scary thing. But this having just that little bit of a machining mark to it, it's not major. I've seen way worse machining marks on varying tools and whatnot that you can definitely tell, oh, but this one actually just has that little bit of kind of a catch, which is nice. So I'm going to put that more as a pro or a feature to the item, which a few chop saws have. I'm not saying this is the only one by any means. We're going to kind of give, second take here, I'm going to kind of give my opinion of the unit and just a quick general overview of it to see, my thoughts and approvals and disapprovals of the unit. We'll kind of go through that with some pros and cons for you here. I will say among other chop saws, this one has a smaller footprint, which is nice depending on the size of workshop that you have going on, or if you're trying to store and go this in a smaller kind of like a little Nissan pickup truck or a Toyota Tacoma. This gives you that little extra room, which is definitely a premium depending on however your workspace is or whatever you're trying to do. If you're going to someone's house to help them with a project, I would actually, if I had both of my current chop saw and this one, I would rather grab this one to throw in a vehicle to quickly go over there. Now, I will say for build and construct of this, I wouldn't necessarily feel 100% confident. I mean, this is still a very stout unit, but there is still some plastic components. I would say I wouldn't feel confident just throwing it in the back of my truck and driving 80, 90 miles for 5 hours to somewhere. I live in Colorado, so if you were to work in a job site and you were to move around from, like, let's say Gunnison to Aspen or Vail or Grand Junction where I live, out way far to Denver and back, I wouldn't feel confident feeling this would handle too well, being the only tool in the back of my pickup truck with nothing strapping it down, just slamming from side to side. Granted, that is an absolute stress test for any tool. I feel if you were to want to do that, you could probably have something like a DeWalt or even a nowadays high-end version of like a Delta or something that's a lot more steel would be able to handle that, and is designed for that more commercial use is what I put it for. So this is still something I put into the lines of more enthusiast kind of grade where you're going to want to utilize it, and you could use this for years. I'm not fretting it. I feel this could actually have the ability to last quite a few years if properly maintained and not racked around in the back of a truck, which any DeWalt or anything else could still fault even after a month of use just because of the abuse of that puts a tool through. So just a note to have kind of in the back of your mind, if you will. I will say out of a lot of units, the ball bearings on this are absolutely butter. The thing just rolls and moves. Even when I did get a little bit of dirt, grime, or sawdust buildup on it in working with my projects in live edge wood or what have you, it still rolled just perfectly fine. The spring in here, as you can see from the unit when I go to push down, is very tight, which is nice. It gives you the ability to quickly let go and the spring will whip it back up if you did, for whatever reason, have your project kind of leap or move if you didn't have it stabilized making your cut. It is a nice benefit, but it is a little tiring pushing it down and whatnot. Like I said, it's not a huge thing by any means. I'd rather it be a nice tight spring in here that lasts a while and then slowly breaks down versus something that's absolute butter to just push down with your finger to where when you do have it for a couple months, it breaks down and you almost have to lift the chop saw up and then just let it drop on whatever you're cutting. That's a recipe for disaster right there, and a not good tool. This would actually make me feel more confident in having that little extra oomph to kind of push it down, even though it does slide so well. The cuts on this, I've read a variety of reviews just to kind of get an idea, and I've talked to a few different people, and they're like, oh man, those things can't make a straight cut to save your life. I will say, this never faulted me. I've never had, except for, like I said earlier, maybe 2 cuts that were off, and they were my fault. I didn't clear out dust on one of them, so there was a whole line of sawdust. It's going to throw anyone's cut off if I'm not paying attention and being a proper, well-educated user of the item and just putting my thought and process into it to maintain the unit. And then the other time, I made the cut real quick and didn't fully push the unit flush against the fence, so the cut was off. That's on me. I can't really fault it for that. The trigger on here is very responsive, and it is pretty, like, you have a little bit of press and then well, there is that no breaks again, which, like I said, I harp on it a little bit. I got spoiled with my units in this price bracket. This is definitely not at all a, that's it, I'm not buying it, but it is something to know for sure, like the brakes and stuff. But other than that, it's a great unit. I will say I do like the pin lock design. Just as goofy of a small little feature as that is, it's something I definitely like, having the ability to just, oh, well, okay, we're done using it, locks it, I'll push it a little bit, and then pop it up in there, and it goes right up. That's a nice feature in my line of thought. The blade guard is very responsive, so going down and up, it goes right perfect unison with the unit. There's a couple chop saws I've had brand new working in the job site. You go to pull them down and it almost seems to kind of wiggle and be very loose on there. This is actually very relatively tight and responsive. You can still flex it. That's any cover that you have just because of the construct of it, but it doesn't feel like when I make my cut and put it back up, the thing's just wiggling right there in your face the whole time, making you wonder if it's ever going to like hit the blade. Which a couple of covers I've seen have blade cuts in them after just a couple weeks of use in them. Brand new units, mind you, but this one is very nice and firm right where you need it to be. Make your cut, and it just goes right up with it immediately. There's no second and then it drops. Another little issue I've seen with a couple chop saws. So going over some of the cons for it though, it doesn't have the blade brakes. Like I said, that's my main complaint with the unit, but I was mainly just because I'm spoiled with it. If you just wait a second, you slow your pace, I get a little antsy and I get cutting, I get moving, I get grooving, and that also could be a recipe for disaster. And I've been told in the past I move very quick and efficiently, but I need to slow myself down on occasion. So this did actually kind of give me a moment to think between my cuts instead of just rocking through it and then realizing that I've made the wrong cut 7 times and now I don't have the material to finish the project, which requires me to either, in my case, go out and get a bunch more reclaimed material, or break down and go to Home Depot or Lowe's to make a purchase for that one piece of material because I'm working on a gift for someone, or I'm working for, commission off of something that was like, hey, I need you to do this for me within this time constraint, and I'm paid ahead of schedule. I'll go and make purchases and I'll go and make cuts and stuff from larger stock material to make sure that I have a happy customer in the end. So that's different things like that. This has given me peace of mind in that one regard for just taking that extra second to make that decision. So it's a pro and a con. It depends on your personality and how you feel you want your tool to act. If that is a breaking point of, oh, no, that's it, I'm not going to purchase it, or if it's going to be something that you don't mind and care about at all. It doesn't come with a blade. That is definitely a con in my book, even though it is a very low price point and there is some benefit to be seen if you are going to purchase a blade regardless. That might seem completely inane or not a problem whatsoever to you, but there are a few people that may not read on the side of the box saying it does not include a blade and may be a very unsatisfied customer. So just keep that in mind when you're at the store thinking of making your purchase. It does not come with a blade. There is a shortness a little bit. There are a couple models that do offer just a little bit longer of a cut, such as the Ryobi that I do have, and I can, like I said, do a comparison between the two if you would like. but it is just a little bit shorter, not a huge thing. One of the things I will say is and isn't a thing, it's not a huge thing by any means, there is no porting on the actual blade cover. So that is, it's designed to try to get a little bit more of a push to get dust into your collection bag, but it will actually, depending on what you're working on, if it's more wet wood that you're cutting through or anything that is a more like a barnyard kind of cutting something real quick to throw it in there to get it taken care of for the day to finish out your chores and work, and you had to use a chop saw real quick, sometimes your material will have a lot of gunk buildup inside of this, and having some porting is kind of a benefit. So like I said, it's not a huge thing, but I would have rather seen a little bit, just a few little portholes to kind of help with that. I can kind of see how their design was meant to do that, but it doesn't ultimately help as much. I would still probably put a collector on it if you really do worry about how much a chop saw in general does put out for dust. Putting a dust collection system of some kind, either a shop vac or an actual dust collector, is going to be your absolute must if you desire to have less sawdust in your workspace. The dust bag collection system is pretty much non-existent. Like I said, all those projects, and I have the most minute amount of sawdust that I will empty after this video, but like I said, there's just the tiniest amount in the bag, and I've done how many projects? It's not a huge thing, but it is something that I kind of see as definitely a con. And through that notion, because not as much dust is collected in the dust bag, I will say as a con is this does create just about as much dust and debris as a circular saw. I will say that even though I kind of like, well, you're working with whatever material you're working with, and it will always create dust and debris, this one does create a little bit more than some of the other chop saws that I have looked at and worked with. But that is also its price point. You're going to give a little bit to get that kind of price point. You're giving something in some regard. So there's a few things in that regard. So to kind of finalize and give my full synapse of how I feel this tool would fit in my lineup, I feel absolutely for the bang for your buck, and the price for what you get is absolutely well worth it. I would purchase this any day of the week if I was looking at a chop saw and I had a little bit more constraint on my purchase price. And if I was using it in a situation, like I said, if I was trying to have something to throw around mildly in the back seat of my pickup truck, or SUV or car to go to a friend's house in my trunk or something like that of a car or SUV, and I would just need to get some little things done. It is cheaper, so technically you could look at it as that way too, that if you were to bang it up and destroy it, you wouldn't be absolutely heartbroken. This isn't some $500-600 unit that if you broke it and it was past warranty, you were just completely out of luck. This could be something that would fit the bill for you, having that ability to kind of have some portability too, but also it would be something perfectly fine for someone just starting out and they wanted to expand to have more tools to do the projects they wanted to do, and they had a set budget. This could definitely fit the bill perfectly. It makes absolutely precise cuts. It can last you a lifetime if you treat it well, and if you do everything that you need to for preventative maintenance. You don't let it sit submerged in, the back of your pickup truck just absolutely getting beaten by rain or something like that. This will last you. No issues whatsoever. Misuse of any tool, of course, will definitely destroy the lifespan of the tool, so that's a given to an extent, but I feel this one isn't going to break under the fault of its own. And I'm not saying there isn't a chance you could get a built on a Friday model that absolutely just out the gate completely fails you. That can happen with anybody. I've had that happen with $900, 12-inch chop saws with all the blades and goodies and everything with it. Absolutely out the gate, walking back into Home Depot pretty much within like 15 minutes of finding out that it's absolute garbage, just walking back in absolutely, all right, compose myself, I'm not going to be irate, but give me another one. Like, it has happened to me. It's a great unit. I would definitely purchase it. No qualms whatsoever, and I think Harbor Freight did it again with another good product. There's a few little gives and takes with it, the blade, and having, no brakes for the blade or anything else like that. It's a little give and take to it, but I feel it would definitely be a great unit for anyone. If you're just starting out, if you've had chop saws in the past, but you need something to do projects, but you're not an absolute commercial grade, glazer or framer, this would definitely fit the bill. And even if you were and wanted something to kind of get you by or something like that, or if you were between paychecks but you still had to get a job done and you're a personal contractor, or a private contractor rather, this would definitely still fit the bill, do everything that you need for it. And if you are your own boss, of course, you'd have the ability to maintain it to your standard, and it would last you just fine. No issues, problems, or anything. So I would say, for especially $95, absolutely. Buy two if you could afford it, and just have one permanently in your vehicle, in the back seat if you do, personal contracting work, and have one permanently in your garage or workshop, just to be able to make cuts real quick and do whatever you need to do, if you have the means, of course. And it would be a good, solid unit for you. So hopefully this has been able to give you just kind of a little bit of a different perspective, maybe bring to light a few little things you wouldn't have necessarily thought of when you're looking at the unit, and then hopefully give you just more of a hands-on look and approach to it. And I feel with certainty, if I did purchase this, I would definitely want to purchase it again. Like I said, this isn't my personal unit, but I do feel it would be a great unit for anyone that wanted to purchase it. So that's been my review. It's been lengthy, it's been waffly, it's gone on a bit, and I do apologize for that. And hopefully you've stuck around to get some good information, or you got the information you were looking for. If nothing else, clicking through it, you found what you needed, hopefully. And if you do enjoy this, if you do enjoy the reviews that I make, or if you want me to make a comparison video between the two, please leave a comment below. Hit that like button, make sure to hit subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that way you know each time I upload. I try to upload twice a week. I'm going to keep sticking to that format best I can. And thank you very much. Hopefully you have yourself a good evening or a good day.